So, besides having flowers, very often what we see in the Magnoliophyta is not just one individual flower, but a series of flowers, a cluster of flowers in a structure known as an inflorescence. And what type of inflorescence a species of flowering plant produces can be diagnostic. And there are some evolutionary trends we see in inflorescence types. So what is an inflorescence? An inflorescence is a cluster or group of flowers on a branch. Okay, so rather than draw out all of our calyx and corolla and andrecium and gynoecium for each of these, I'm going to represent each flower just kind of like there's a flower, okay? So that kind of U shape represents a flower that's fully open. And if we just have one flower all on its own, that can happen sometimes. We call that a solitary flower. Not much of an inflorescence. So what happens if we were to take a whole bunch of flowers? And usually in this case, what we see is we got a whole bunch of flowers attached directly to this stem, and these closed circles represent flower buds that have not quite opened yet. So open flowers, and these are the flowers that are ready. These are the soon-to-be flowers. But notice they're all attached directly to the peduncle. They share a peduncle. And so when that happens, the flowers are all attached directly to that peduncle. That's called a spike. Now, our next inflorescence says, okay, what if they share a peduncle, but what if each of them has their own little stem? There's a little bit of branching going on. And this is called it's going to look like I'm writing Raceme, but that's really pronounced Raceme. And it's called a raceme. And you can see each of the flowers has its own little stem. And that is called a pedicel, a pedicel. It's called a pedicel. All right, so we can take that to the next level and say, what if we have not just one main axis with all the flowers on it, but what if we've got flowers that are off branches of branches? And this is something called a Panicle, a panicle. So rather than just having that one single peduncle, we've got a stem that is branched, and that branch has subordinate branches on there. That's a panicle. Now, picture, if you will, that we've got a flowering stem, and we've got a whole bunch of flowers, but they all kind of radiate out from a single axis. And I'll show you some picture examples of all of these, hopefully. And if you've ever seen Queen Anne's lace is a good example of this type of inflorescence. It's called an umbel. And it's kind of easy to remember because it kind of looks like an umbrella. with everything kind of radiating out from one point. And more, well, sometimes you'll just see simple umbels. But very often you'll see an umbel of umbels. And this is called a compound umbel. Compound umbel, which is an umbel of umbels. So imagine we took this, and then each of these little flowers here, instead of being a flower, there is just another umbel attached to it. And the last inflorescence that I'm going to hold you accountable for, start with the letter T. And instead of having an umbel, imagine that we've got a few dozen or a few hundred flowers that are all sharing a common receptacle. And then maybe some of the flowers that are on the edge of that common receptacle are just going to produce one gigantic petal. Sometimes they'll do that. Sometimes they won't. They'll just be a whole bunch of flowers sharing one common receptacle. We call this a capitulum. Or sometimes we use the good old English word for a capitulum rather than the Latin word, which is a head. So capitulum or head. And I guarantee you have seen this before if you've even just been a casual observer of nature. This is like what a sunflower is doing. So a sunflower, you might think that thing at the top of the sunflower is just one individual flower, but it's not. That giant sunflower is actually a capitulum where you've got just hundreds of flowers that are all sharing one common receptacle, and each of those little facets in the middle is in itself a botanical flower with its own calyx, corolla, andrecium, and gynoecium. So this is actually one of the largest families of flowering plants. The Asteraceae specializes in having this type of inflorescence. And I know you've seen it if you've ever seen a sunflower or a dandelion or a chrysanthemum or a thistle. Just hundreds and hundreds of species that have this particular type of inflorescence. But these are the ones I'm going to hold you accountable for, and if with any luck, after I've edited this, you will have some pictures of these as well. Happy drawing!